말씀 나누겠습니다. 에스겔서 22장 30절부터 31절까지 말씀을 보도록 하겠습니다. 우리 한 목소리를 읽도록 하겠습니다. 이 땅을 위하여 성을 쌓으며 성 무너진 데를 막아서서 나로 하여금 멸하지 못하게 할 사람을 내가 그 가운데서 찾다가 찾지 못하였으므로 내가 내 분노를 그들 위에 쏟으며 내 진노의 불로 멸하여 그들 행위대로 그들 머리에 보응하였느니라. 주 여호와의 말씀이니라. 아멘.
In the ancient world, a wall was a lovely thing. It wasn't beautiful because of the construction, although some of them were. It was beautiful because behind a wall, you and your family were safe. Walls were a defense against very real threats. Ezra calls the wall of protection in Judah and Jerusalem. The ancient walls were a strong defense that, if they had soldiers on it defending it, could keep attackers out of a city for years. And so there were various strategies that people used in order to defeat a wall. For example, one of the easiest was to get a spy or to pay somebody inside the city to give up the city. But another way would be to find a way under. That's the way Jerusalem was taken by David. They found a way through a well, and they got up into the city that way. Or to climb the wall, or to break it down, or just to trap the people inside and wait for them to run out of food and water. And that was another thing that was often done. Because a wall was such a strong defense, it was a symbol of strength and security. And a broken down wall became the symbol of a conquered city. So, for example, in 2 Kings 14:13, Joash broke down a 600-foot section of Jerusalem's wall, and that meant that the city was weakened. When Babylon conquered Jerusalem, they broke down the wall completely. And many years later, when Nehemiah heard that the wall still had not been rebuilt, he cried out because he said that the people were in disgrace because they did not have the wall. Now in Ezekiel 22:30 through 31, the wall takes on a more symbolic meaning. God says, I looked for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found none. Using this image of a defensive border, he was not speaking, of course, of a physical wall, but of a spiritual defense. Because what the people needed was a defense against the judgment of God. You know, what physical wall could keep God away? It's obviously a spiritual wall. In Ezekiel's day, the society was becoming swamped with sin. And if you read the preceding verses, it's really powerful. But society was becoming swamped with sin. And sin was saturating people and their lives from the street all the way to the palace. The leaders of the state, all the way down to the individual, they were becoming uninterested in justice. They were taking advantage of others for financial gain and for personal prosperity. And most sadly of all, perhaps, is the condemnation of the religious leaders who were literally rejecting the Word of God. And they had failed to teach the people the difference between right and wrong, between what was unclean and what was clean, between what was sin and what was righteousness. And they were teaching as truth things that the Lord did not say. They were spiritual traitors to God Himself. The level of proper behavior and righteousness in the society as a whole was becoming lower and lower. And as it did, God's judgment began crowding in. The wall that held back judgment, then as now, was proper belief, proper behavior, and submission to God. This is an intangible wall, but it's very real. It's found in the individual's thoughts and behavior. It's found in our collective culture, in our lifestyles, in our movements, in our institutions. It's found in our religious understandings and our religious behavior. And when we begin to realize this, and we look at this nation that we're living in, we have to cry out. We are defeated. We are disgraced. For our protections against God's judgment are lying in ruins all around us. In our day, we are watching the systematic dismantling of this nation's wall of protection. The horrors of what happened in the Florida school last week is only a symptom of a far deeper and fatal disease. Now listen to the people on the news, and they're moaning about it. Oh, why does this happen? Why? And they want to make laws. Let's pass more laws that'll make it right. And they blame the guns and the knives and all the weapons or whatever. They blame those things as though they got up and did it on their own. But it's the people. It's the heart of the people. It is their spirituality. It's their morality. It's like being terminally ill with cancer and complaining, does this lump make me look fat? Now, historically, Christianity has been a great engine of social protection. The great revivals of the 17 and 1800s pulled this nation back from secularism and sin. The anti-slavery movement was driven largely by Christian faith. The women's rights movement for voting and so forth was driven by Christian belief. Civil rights was based on Christian ideas of what is right and wrong. But with the mounting rejection of Christian truth and principles, we are watching the fall of the wall of protection. As a people, we can debate whether a southern wall, a wall along the southern border, should be built or shouldn't be built. But we are tearing down, brick by brick, the spiritual wall of protection, and we are defenseless. And so as God said in Ezekiel, He is going to bring down on their heads all that they have done. Now we have to confess that we Christians bear some of the responsibility for the condition of this nation. I think we've grown weary of doing good. I'm not speaking of any individuals here, but as a general culture of Christians in the United States, we've grown weary of doing good. And we have kind of accepted the destruction, saying, it's either out of our power or it's normal. And some have even said it's good. Some churches in this country are literally with their own hands helping to tear down the wall with their teaching that evil is proper behavior and proper behavior is wrong. So we have to ask, is the destruction of our wall too far along? Are we beyond salvation? I don't ever think that. I have looked at God's power throughout the ages, and I think He can completely change course. He can make things happen. There can be revival. There can be transit change. Things can happen. But what should we do? First of all, I think that it requires labor. We have to ask this question: who tore down the wall in the first place? And we have to realize that it's the people, not some impersonal force or some law. And we will often find ourselves, as we are trying to do what is right, we will find ourselves working against the will of the crowd. Especially today, the crowd is moving over the cliff of destruction. And if we're trying to get away, we're trying to push the nation back, they are going to get upset with us. They're going to call us intolerant. They're going to call us racist. They're going to call us homophobic. They're going to call us all kinds of names, whatever they can think of. They're going to call us those names, and they're going to try to make us feel like we should be ashamed of ourselves because we're trying to protect them. Even in some of our churches, doing what is right and working for what is right will be unpopular, but we must still put our hands to the task. We must work to rebuild the wall. First of all, we must stop collaborating with those who are tearing it down. We need to stop saying, "Oh, yeah, that's okay." We need to stop saying, "Oh, yeah, people can have a different lifestyle, and we need to be sensitive and we need to be kind." We need to stop looking at the things they look at, dressing the way they dress, talking the way they talk, doing the things they do, because the wall is built out of our beliefs, our thoughts, and our actions. On the opposite hand, we have to set an example of what is righteous, what is just. And obviously, in the current situation, that is not going to go over well. And we're going to take some trouble for it. We must get involved with the work. We must contribute the materials, and we must feed the laborers. But that will not be enough. And I've kind of alluded to this because this is really a call for self-sacrifice, to stand in the gap. We must put ourselves in the broken down gap in the wall of protection and protect these people, even if they don't want it, with our lives. We must seek to turn back God's judgment. Ezekiel said that God looked for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand before him in the gap on behalf of the land so that he would not have to destroy it, but he found none. Will he find none today? Immediately, I think of Moses. Remember when the people sinned and God threatened to destroy the people? Moses said, "No, kill me instead. Destroy me, but let the people be because of your great glory. If you kill your people that you've delivered out of Egypt, people are going to say that you hated your people," and so forth. And Moses was willing to die for wicked people in order to protect them and to protect God's righteousness. You could say that he stood in the broken part of the wall of protection and placed himself between God's wrath and the people, and he saved them. He turned back God's wrath. Even though the people had no idea what he did. They had no idea what was going on. Of course, we can think of the far greater example as our own Lord Jesus Christ. Remember in Isaiah 53, it says that he was despised and rejected. He was a man of sorrows. He was familiar with suffering. Why? Because he stood in the gap. He was like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. It was the work of Christ to stand in the gap. He placed everything that he had between us and God's judgment, and he saved us. Now, I'm not saying that we can save people in the same level or the same way, but if we're to walk in the steps of Christ, we have to also be willing to take that burden and that shame in order to protect the people. It's time for us to get up and stand in that gap. We must protect these people with our own lives, We must pray for them. We must intercede for them with God. We must be the one who answers the call. We must be the man, be the woman among them who will build up the wall and stand before God in the gap on behalf of this nation, so God will not have to destroy it. Let us not hear God say that he found none to do it.